Good day, CCF family! Welcome back to Sunday Fast Track. I am Mel Santos, together with Pastor Ricky, and we want to thank him for his wonderful message to us on conquering anger this Sunday. So, first question po, Pastor Ricky, there's a famous saying, forgive and forget. But there is another equally famous saying that says, I can forgive, but I will never forget. Is it possible to forgive someone without forgetting how they have hurt or angered us? Or is our decision not to forget still a sign of residual anger in our hearts toward the person who hurt us?
Wow, that's a really loaded question, Pastor Mel. And before we try to supply an answer, please extend my love and my greetings to the brethren in Dubai and the rest of that part of the world. Now, first, let's make it very clear. The Bible commands us to forgive. That certainly is very clear. And forgiveness, one of the implications of forgiveness is to not to take that person's offense against him in the future. So let me just address that second supposedly famous saying, I can forgive, but I will never forget. If the implication of that statement is, I quote unquote forgive you, but I don't want to have anything to do with you, I don't want to see you again on the face of this earth, chances are you have not really forgiven. Now, let me address the first supposedly famous saying, forgive and forget. You see, when we forgive, God does not do a memory wipe in our brain. And perhaps one of the reasons is so that we can continue to learn to process hurt better and better His way in the future. If sometimes the hurt still comes back, you still feel a little pain when you remember what that person did to you, I would say that is absolutely normal. And it is another chance to again process with God and ask Him, Lord, why am I feeling angry? Lord, what do you want me to do?
Thank you, Pastor Ricky, for enlightening us on that. The second question is this. In a heated discussion or argument, communication gets complicated. And so, how do I communicate my point of view or my feelings without sounding angry, disrespectful, or dismissive of the way the other party feels, whether it's children talking to their parents, or parents to children, employees to bosses, and even in peer discussions?
Thank you, Pastor Mel. That is a very real, down to earth question. And I would say three things that we need to do our best to get into the conversation in a way that will glorify God. The first one I would say is we need to check our motive. Why do I feel I need to say something? Or why do I decide not to say anything? For example, if we decide not to say anything because we're simply protecting ourselves, despite the Spirit of God prompting us to say something that needs to be said, then that is wrong. That is disobedience, that is selfishness, and simply self preservation. So check your motive. Do you really want to help the people involved in this conversation with what you're going to say? And ultimately, do you want to glorify God and obey the prompting of His Spirit with what you're going to say? So, first is check your motives. And second is choose your words very carefully. Ask the Holy Spirit to give you the right words. You remember the prodigal son? As he was going on his way home, he was rehearsing what he would say to his father. Let's ask God's help to choose our words very carefully. And finally, number three, be careful about your tone of voice. Sometimes we may use the right words, but our tone gives away the anger that's really brewing in our heart. I believe if we've done these three things and we've squared them off clearly with God, and we go ahead and say what He has laid upon our hearts that needs to be said, everything else is beyond our control. How the people will react or respond, that is already in God's department. The important thing is we have obeyed God and we've done our best to represent Him in that heated discussion or argument where the communication has become complicated.
Thank you for that very practical answer, Pastor Ricky. Our third, final question. It has been said in the past, hate the sin, not the sinner. How do we draw the line between being angry over someone's sin and being angry at the person?
The first thing I'd say is drawing that line is really very, very difficult. I'd rather say that the most important thing is what we talked about in the message. Remember the two questions? Lord, why am I angry? And Lord, what do you want me to do? And in helping to answer this question, I want to address what people call an elephant in the room. You see, many people say, didn't Jesus get angry? And the answer is, yes, he did. But let me just say a few things about that particular incident, which you can read about in Matthew 21 and other parts in the Bible. Number one, he didn't become famous for his righteous indignation. This was one incident in his life, yes, but he was best known for his compassion, for his love, for his mercy. All right, let's get that straight. Second is, what was Jesus angry at? He was angry when he cleansed the temple in Matthew 21. He was angry at injustice, corruption, how people in authority were taking advantage of people who had no other choice and they were milking them for their money. That's why Jesus said, this place, which should be a house of prayer, you have turned it into a den of thieves. It wasn't just a matter of commercializing the temple. It was the total perversion of God's holy house, which should be a house of prayer and a house of worship. You see, this wasn't about Jesus being personally insulted or physically hurt. He took so much of that upon himself, and yet he never said a word. But when it was about the holiness of God, when it was about corruption and sin in the heart of man, he said what needed to be said, and he did what needed to be done. But note, he never physically abused anyone. He never verbally abused anyone. He never held a grudge against anyone. And ultimately, he went to the cross to pay for the sins of the same people who were perverting the house of God. So, folks, going back to the question, it's difficult to draw that line, but I would like to take us back to those two questions. Lord, why am I angry? And Lord, what do you want me to do about it?
Thank you, Pastor Ricky, for answering our questions. And for those of you who are watching right now, you can send your questions on the chat box and our panelists might answer some of them during our webinar about today's message this coming Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. We'll see you there. God bless you.